25th Hour Radio Show.
Everybody, most people outside the martial arts community know our guest today is the man portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme in the motion picture Bloodsport. Now, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to his accomplishments. From 1975 to 1980, our guest reigned undefeated as full-contact Kumite World Heavyweight Champion. He holds records for most consecutive knockouts with 56 and fastest knockout at 3.2 seconds. He is also a source contributor to the Navy SEALs Spec 1 manual, and in 2011 he was a keynote speaker for the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association and shared that honor with United States Air Force General Carlton Everhart. He's often referred to as the godfather of mixed martial arts, and of course I'm talking about the man himself, Grandmaster Frank Dux. Grandmaster, Dux, thank you so much for being on our program.
Well, thank you. I just so you know, I just call me Frank. I'm not a person who gets caught up in these titles, Grandmaster, or Doctor, or whatever. I just rather let my work speak for myself and just function in that manner.
Most people outside the martial arts community know you from your role in Bloodsport, but I'd like to shed some light on some of your other amazing accomplishments. After doing some research on you, and if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about your 3 world records that you set in France in 1993. Sure. Can you please describe to our listeners in your own words those records that you set that year in France?
Well, in that year, on a bet, people used to make a comment about, well, I can take, you're so worried for martial arts, I can take you with a gun. And my comment to them is, well, first you've got to get the gun out of your pocket before I can strike you, and I can promise you I can strike you harder than that bullet can. And people used to scoff at that until finally one day I took up the challenge, and I basically went to Paris, France. I asked Bushido magazine in France, who put on the International Martial Arts Festival, to sponsor me, and they provided the funds to actually go out and get and have built the bulletproof glass, a frame, so I could, where it was shot, and I became the only human being in the world to generate enough force to punch through bulletproof glass.
That was an amazing accomplishment. I've seen that. That was amazing.
Yeah, and then and then I also did what we call a compression strike, which had never been done before, on a bottle. If you know, I don't know if anybody knows this, but you can take 4 bottles and you can actually hold up a car with it. I mean, there's enough resistance in glass if it's for force going straight down on it to hold up an actual automobile. And so I did a compression strike where I broke a Jack Daniels bottle, and then I also did 2 champagne bottles at varying heights. I did a jumping kick because I was famous for what they used to call me as the flying horse. And that's because I was real famous for going to the air, and I could hit a guy with a multiple leg attack while in the air, and I would devastate my opponents with it, and people would never think that much about it. They would think, oh, no, it has to be this flying sidekick to getting force, and I demonstrated that that's not the case, and I did the break at one at groin height, and the one, of course, just at head height, and so with the same leg, and it's using the same leg and never touching the ground, and I'm chambering and cocking it in the air twice. So front kick to the groin height kick, and then destroying the champagne bottle, and then of course to the side of the head and breaking it. And a lot of people think that's easy, and I dare them to try to strike a bottle, champagne. In fact, when they use them on ships, they actually score them before they send them into the side of the ship and they break.
Mm-hmm. For such great accomplishments, there wasn't hardly, as far as I could find, that much press in the United States on this. And I myself find that to be kind of almost offensive, because these were feats that showcase human potential, You're talking about mind over matter, focus, determination, skill, and power. Just amazing achievements. Why do you think there was such lack of publicity?
Well, there's any number of reasons. I think the reason is because it's a closed industry. It's a corrupt industry. I mean, the martial art industry in itself is just you have people pass themselves off as having leading trade magazines, but what they really are is they're engaged in the trade libel of other people, discrimination, monopolization, and they deal in unfair and unethical business ethics. And of course, I didn't want to play ball with them or go along with certain misrepresentations that they were making in the field of martial arts in the United States. And as a result of that, I was on the outside. They were making all sorts of false representations to promote their books and their magazines and their products. And it's just a matter of greed and corruption and lack of regulation. And
Rand,
yeah,
I'm sorry. I was going to turn this over to my co-host because he's really excited about talking to you. This is Randy Ashby, Frank. He's got a question for you.
Sure.
Frank, how do you do? I'm Randy. I just want to start off by saying that it's such an honor to have such a legendary martial artist on the show.
Well, thank you.
I've been a big fan of yours since I was a kid. I'm going to change the direction here just a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the trophy that had so much controversy surrounding it. An LA Times journalist tried to make a name for himself, seems like to me anyway, by writing an article disputing your accomplishments. Can you tell our listeners your side of the story and all the events surrounding that? Sure.
I mean, the guy was just totally acting with malice, so much so that what people don't realize is he's behaving in such an outlandish and brazen manner that I was actually getting called by people who actually would get in arguments with the guy. I mean, Ed Parker, who's the father of karate in the United States, who introduced the Long Beach Invitationals, who introduced Bruce Lee to the world, essentially, got in a huge scathing argument with this guy because the guy kept pushing the agenda and even tried to intimidate, if you can imagine, Ed Parker, and he obviously didn't understand Ed's role in terms of the martial arts world, because he's not from that world, this reporter. He just had an agenda. And he made that very clear to the point, I mean, Ed was telling him, so look, I can name extended family members, that fought with Frank and fought Frank in the Kumite, and what you're trying to propose and say is just absolutely ludicrous. And what was really going on behind that is really that Bloodsport came out and it showed that I was trained by a ninja master. Well, up until that time, Black Belt Magazine, which was owned by Mito Ohara, who owned Rainbow Publications, which is Black Belt Magazine, Fighting Stars, I think Karate, Kung Fu Illustrated. I'm not sure all the magazines that he had, but he had a number of them. Then he also had a thing called Ohara Books. And of course, what they would do is they build up certain stars and make claims around them, and then based on that, they sell their books. And by making those claims, part of what they do is they eliminate the competition by inferring doubt. Like they would take this one guy, I won't mention his name, but they were saying he's the one and sole only real legitimate ninja outside, of Japan teaching it, inferring everybody but him is a fraud. And here comes this movie disputing that. So they went on the attack, basically, is what I think happened there. And, the irony of the whole thing is this guy in his own organization had 20 guys who had been teaching ninjutsu, which is what they were saying he was the only person to legitimately teach it for years. And they were doing it since the 1960s, 20 years ahead of him. And even ahead of him was a gentleman by the name of Ron Duncan. And Ron Duncan had been doing, seminars and holding classes and demonstrations in Madison Square Gardens in the 1960s, where I was reading an article in the Amsterdam News called Racism in Martial Arts, and I even talked to Ron, and he said, O'Hara actually, when that happened, just called him another nigger in a kimono, and was just outraged at the idea that a black man should be the one who breaks into the American marketplace with this martial art, and it isn't even a martial art, because ninjutsu is not a martial art; it's a field of study. It's like saying karate is a martial art. for many years people thought karate was just one thing, and it wasn't. It's actually a field of study with many different disciplines falling within it, just like Kung Fu has many different disciplines falling within it. And even in Judo, you have different systems of Judo, so in Jiu-Jitsu. So it's really kind of ridiculous how they basically took advantage of the public's ignorance and exploited it to basically make a buck and eliminate competition. And I was a threat to that, and they were going to do everything in their power. And the irony is, I mean, the guy was attributing statements like saying, I represented myself to the Medal of Honor winner and all these other things. No, I never made that representation. It's bogus. What he cited as proof turned out, and this came out in court proceedings, of libel and slander years later, was the so-called proof was this flyer that he cites, and in the flyer is a picture of me, and in the picture, it was that picture we traced back was taken by the LA Times reporter, photographer. And here in the same picture appeared in the article from that thing. So he's citing this, it's really interesting. He's citing this thing in this, grainy flyer, making all these false claims that they're attributing to me, which he holds up in his article to legitimize his false statement. And it just all points all the way back, all right back to him. And they don't show that picture anymore once it came out, and a number of sources have looked at it, other journalists have looked at it. So instead of, when they reprint the article, they purposely withhold that picture. They don't show that picture now. And if you look at my trophy, and you look at the receipt that he was using, his so-called proof in his article, well, on its face, it's fraudulent, starting with the fact it misspelled my name. My name is spelled D-U-X, not D-U-K-E-S, which was on the receipt, as I'm sure you saw if you went to some of these sources. It wasn't even for the same, for the same trophy. I mean, it has 4 judo figures. Mine's a tall pedestal with a silver cup. Wrong date. And the quote he got and used, he says he talked to the trophy manufacturer, and the trophy manufacturer is quoted correctly by him, says, oh, yeah, we partially made it. What the reporter did that's devious and really deceptive is he withholds the fact that the reason he said it when he partially made it is because it had to be recreated because 2 guys had broken into my school. They were arrested and convicted for destroying the trophy and destroying much of the materials that was being demanded by these other magazines, saying, afterwards, we need to see this kind of proof to prove who he is or what he is, when they were responsible for destroying the evidence. I mean, that's how ridiculous and how corrupt the field can be. And we're talking about, what could potentially be a multi-billion-dollar, global consumer fraud. And it's huge. I mean, it's also that fraud was responsible for generating a tremendous amount of tourism to Japan. So, we don't know that the reason there's no criminal prosecution is because they were afraid of what it might do in the form of hurting tourism, and how different governments might have gotten involved behind the scenes. I couldn't tell you. But all I can tell you is what he did was on its face a lie. The Times still prints, even though it knows that the information is false, that it's been shown to be false in court proceedings, they still put it up online. They still hold it up there, and people are still being directed to it. Because, I mean, let's be honest, I don't have the financial wherewithal to take on an LA Times. I mean, just to go to court. An attorney told me I'm looking at $1 million to win any kind of protracted litigation. That's more than I've ever made in my life. So we're really seeing, in many ways, through the martial arts, and I hate to say it, but an actual, class system and class warfare going on. Those who've got the money and who have the wherewithal write the rules and rewrite history. And
right.
and that's what I've gone up against, is this history revisionism that is taking place, and you see it really. It's really in your face, especially with like a magazine like Black Book Magazine, because if you look at the covers, just do an image search, and if you go through the covers, you won't find a single black man, on the covers from like the 1960s forward. Why? Because they didn't participate in martial arts. They dominated the sport, for crying out loud. You had Vic Moore, who beat Bruce Lee in a test of speed, but given this, the publication, it was in the interest of promoting this legend of Bruce Lee, and not to take anything away from him, because to me, I mean, he's a huge inspiration in my life. But the truth is, the victory went to Vic Moore, who was the first black USK karate champion. Did he ever make a cover? No. Vic Moore is responsible for introducing, professional kickboxing to the masses on the Merv Griffin show with Joe Louis. Is there any coverage of that? No. The man is responsible for for fighting them all and beating them all, from Chuck Norris, Mike Stone, Joe Louis, and you don't hear anything about it. And that's, to me, especially I think with Black History Month coming up, that to me is a crime and something that really needs to be corrected, and we need to do something about that. The unfortunate thing is we don't have the financial means to do it, and it certainly looks like the regulating agencies that are supposed to do this are looking the other way, maybe to spare themselves from embarrassment because it's gone on for so long, or maybe because so many of them, their own officers, are actually involved in perpetrating it. I know a number of guys who are former law enforcement or whatever, and they're the worst guys involved in creating trade libel. I can think of one guy in particular. He went on and said, I made inconsistent statements. I said I won my championship in Jamaica, and then I said it in this source, and then I said something else somewhere else. I actually went on the guy's blog and put on there what was really said, and said, no, you're lying. This is not what it says, and here's what it really says. And in the day of age of cut and paste, you had to have changed the names and places, because it wouldn't have shown up like this. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't have been a type error. And so, to me, it suggested he intentionally changed it to try to, again, assert false claims to me and do things like that. And that's what happens, unfortunately, in a field, in any field. I don't care what you're in, if it goes unregulated, and people aren't going to be held accountable.
And Frank, we here at the 25th Hour, we respect your accomplishments, and we know that you're the real deal. And I'm going to turn it over to Robert. I know that he has a question. Robert Reams has a question for you.
Yeah, well, you're currently working as an advisor to the board of a company called Falcon Industries that specializes in security. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't mind, can you give us a little insight on what exactly Falcon Industries does and what's your role with them?
Well, Falcon Industries, I'm a corporate advisor. I can't go into too much what goes on, but it was a high-speed component of what used to be or worked with. If anybody's familiar with a company called Blackwater, and that's about as much as I can say. They provide security services all over the world, and they are able to put real credentialed, top-notch kind of people on the ground in situations of crisis. Like, for example, with this, I think it was a tornado just recently that they were able to have 100 security officers ready to go and help maintain the peace in a time of crisis.
Okay.
Hey, Frank, we got about 7 minutes left, man. And I
want
to
also engage in like setting up training programs. By the way, we teach the teachers of teachers in like correctional facilities, military police. It's just a good example of what I can talk about right now. Different operations, and it's really where the best guys in the field get picked up, and they end up in working with Falcon, and I'm talking the creme de la creme. And this gives them an opportunity where different, agencies around the world who really have a problem, they need a focus group to work with them, and Falcon can provide those services. And I'm very proud to be a member of that, and actually oversee the defensive tactics programs and be able to rewrite programs for different indigenous areas based on their threats.
I'd like to, real quick, Frank, we've got about, like I said, about 6 minutes left now on the show. And I know you got a system you call Dux Fast. Could you explain to our listeners your system?
Yeah. Dux really is the Latin word for me, even though it's my name. It's also means to be number one. And what FAST stands for is focus, action, skills, strategy, tactics. And it's a system that integrates all those 5 principles, and by integrating those 5 principles in a certain manner, I've learned how to bypass what we call the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain that basically where you find hesitation and you're able to react or act in a situation. And what I do is I focus on acting versus reacting. And we learn and we teach our personnel how to evolve as opposed to memorize techniques. So they actually evolve to the fight or flight principle in a matter of you're just able to go to the frontal cortex of the brain and access the information and deal with the threat. You basically bridge the gap. The advantage of the program, of course, is the fact that in a situation where reaction time means a difference between life or death for yourself or other people, especially terrorist situations. In the middle of a terrorist situation, every second that goes by, you can count that's a life lost. So if 4 seconds go by before your team can act or address the situation, you can bet there's 4 lives lost. So if you can go from 4 seconds to 1 second or even a millisecond, you can save and spare many lives. And that's what my program's all about. Of course, it can be transposed into other areas. You can take the same technology and you can apply it to business. You can apply it to relationships and make use of it.
Okay. Frank, I'm sorry to say this, man, but we're almost out of time. But before we go, can you tell everyone where they can go to get more information about you, such as maybe your websites, social media?
Yeah, I have some students of mine, and they maintain some sites that are really good for information. What I would recommend for an independent site, I would go to worldwidedojo.com. In fact, there you can see me. I write a number of articles on different systems, different aspects of the martial arts. If you're interested, I highly suggest you go there and look up my columns, Legends and Legacies. I think you'll find that fascinating. It's worldwidedojo.com. Other than that, you can go to www.frankwdukes.com. And the reason it's frankwdukes.com is because there's so many people out there impersonating me, unfortunately. But that's one of the websites. It's an information hub. And there's another one called Fast Dux Ryu, and that's FASSTDUXRYU.com, and that's another great source to basically see a bunch of articles in one place and even try to find me if you'd like to contact me in the future.
Sure. Frank, man, we thank you so much for being on our show. You definitely opened our eyes on the current state of affairs in martial arts, and we hope one day soon that you'll come back and talk to us again, because 30 minutes ain't very long, and I'm sure we could sit and talk to you about martial arts all day long.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure to come back and talk to you guys. If you want any topic you'd like to discuss, I'm more than happy to do it. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on your show and address those issues today.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead, Randy. I'm sorry.
I just want to say it was a complete honor to meet you, Frank Dux. Absolute honor.
Well, it's my pleasure, guys. And I only have one thing I request of your listeners out there, and that is if you enjoyed the show, just do 3 random acts of kindness for some perfect stranger. That's if you want to honor me, that's the best way you can do it.
Well, Frank, thanks again for being on our show. This has been the 25th Hour Radio Show. Until then, I'm Rob Fairless, and for my co-host Randy Ashby and Robert Reams, we will talk to you again later.
5th Hour Radio Show.